The sun was about to set, casting an eerie glow over the area. The gentle breeze rustled the tree branches, and the chirping of birds filled the air. James liked patrolling this park, but today, something felt different. Suddenly, someone tugged at his uniform sleeve, and the chirping of birds filled the air. He saw a little boy, James, about 7 years old, standing today, terrified. Something felt different. His brown face was marked with fear, as if he had seen something no one else had. "Officer, I need to tell you something," the boy whispered. James knelt down and gently asked, "What is it, son?" The boy's trembling voice uttered 5 chilling words, "That man is watching me." The unseen stalker. A chill ran down James' spine. He immediately stood up and scanned the surroundings, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The boy's eyes were fixed on a specific spot. James followed his gaze, but all he saw was a bench with an old man sitting on it. "Which man?" James whispered back. Ethan pointed with a shaky finger, but when James turned to look again, there was no one there. His heartbeat quickened. He grabbed his radio and alerted the nearby officers to stay on high alert. "What's your name?" James asked. "Ethan." The boy murmured. "The hidden truth." Ethan's voice quivered as he said, "He was following me yesterday, and the day before. He wants to take me away." James reassured Ethan and asked about his parents. Ethan whispered, "My mom is at work, and my dad, he's not around anymore." To investigate further, James headed to the park's security camera control room. When they reviewed the footage, the truth was revealed: a shadowy figure had been stalking Ethan for the past 3 days. Chasing the mysterious figure, James ordered his team to move in. Moments later, at the far end of the park, a suspicious man appeared. He was middle-aged, wearing tattered clothes, and staring at Ethan with unsettling intensity. James stepped forward, but as soon as he called out to the man, he bolted. "Stop!" James yelled and sprinted after him. Chasing the mysterious figure, James ordered his team to move in. Moments later, at the far end of the park, a suspicious man appeared. He was middle-aged, wearing tattered clothes, and staring at Ethan with unsettling intensity. James stepped forward, but as soon as he called out to the man, he bolted. "Stop!" James yelled and sprinted after him. Finally, James caught the man in a deserted alley. When he tried to identify him, he discovered he was a wanted criminal involved in multiple child abductions. "How do you know Ethan?" James demanded. The man smirked and said chillingly, "Because I'm his father, and I've come to take him back." James felt as if the ground beneath him had disappeared. Ethan's mother had always said his father was dead. But the truth was something else entirely. A mother's secret. James immediately called Ethan's mother. When she arrived, her face turned pale. "How is he alive?" He was supposed to be dead." Fear gleamed in her eyes. The truth was finally exposed: Ethan's father was a notorious criminal who had abandoned his family years ago. He was dangerous, and Ethan's mother had faked his death to protect her son. But now, he had returned. Officer Ryan was patrolling a busy street when a frightened little girl, Emily, tugged at his sleeve and whispered 4 chilling words, "She is not Mom." Before he could react, a woman forcefully dragged Emily away. Sensing danger, Ryan immediately called for backup, setting off a race against time to uncover the truth. Before we dive into this story, let us know where you're watching from, and if you believe in the power of courage and justice, hit that like button and subscribe for more compelling. The camera captures a bustling street with people walking in different directions. Cars pass by swiftly, and shops and stalls line the sidewalks. Police Officer Ryan, dressed in his uniform, patrols the street. The cold air carries a sense of weariness on people's faces. Ryan, VO, thinking these streets hold countless stories, some ordinary, some that send chills down your spine. But today, something feels different. Maybe someone's silence is about to turn into a scream. Suddenly, a little girl, Emily, with fear-stricken eyes and trembling hands, tugs at Ryan's sleeve. The bustling hospital hallway was alive with the sound of beeping monitors and hurried footsteps. Dr. Emily Carter, a young and ambitious doctor, rushed to the operating room, her white coat fluttering behind her. She had just been assigned to assist Dr. Richard Grayson, the hospital's star surgeon, known for his skill and his arrogance. As Emily entered the OR, Dr. Grayson was already scrubbing in, his sharp tone cutting through the air. "Ah, the newbie. Try not to slow me down today, Carter. This isn't med school anymore." Emily clenched her jaw but remained silent, focusing on the patient, a middle-aged man with a ruptured aortic aneurysm. The surgery began, and Grayson's confidence was on full display. He barked orders at the nurses, dismissing Emily's suggestions with a scoff. "Stick to sutures, Carter. Leave the real work to me," he said. But as the surgery pills, Dr. Grayson, the patient from earlier, is crashing. "I think it's internal bleeding. We need to take him back to the OR now." Grayson leaned back in his chair, unfazed. "Relax, Carter. You're overreacting. The surgery went perfectly. He's probably just stressed." Emily's frustration boiled over. "With all due respect, sir, if we don't act now, he's going to die." Grayson rolled his eyes but finally agreed to check on the patient. When they arrived in the ICU, the monitors confirmed Emily's fears. Grayson's confidence wavered for the first time, but he quickly masked it with bravado. "Fine, let's take him back." "But this is a waste of time," he muttered. The mistake revealed. The tension peaks as Grayson's error becomes apparent. Back in the OR, Grayson reopened the incision only to find a pool of blood. The small tear Emily had noticed earlier had worsened, causing massive internal bleeding. Grayson's hands froze for a moment, his arrogance replaced by panic. I don't understand. This shouldn't have happened," he stammered. Emily stepped forward, her voice steady. "We need to clamp the aorta and repair the tear. Now." Grayson hesitated, his pride preventing him from admitting his mistake. "I don't need this, Carter. I've got this." But as he fumbled with the instruments, the patient's condition deteriorated further. The nurses exchanged worried glances, and the tension in the room was palpable. Emily takes charge. Emily steps up to save the day. Seeing that Grayson was paralyzed by his own ego, Emily made a bold decision. "Step aside, Dr. Grayson. I'll take it from here." Grayson stared at her in disbelief but didn't argue as she took his place. With precision and calm, Emily clamped the aorta, repaired the tear, and stabilized the patient. The OR team watched in awe as she worked, her confidence and skill undeniable. When the monitors finally showed stable vitals, the room erupted in relieved murmurs. Grayson stood in the corner, his face a mix of shock and humiliation. The aftermath. The climax and resolution highlight the shift in power dynamics. The next day, the hospital buzzed with news of Emily's heroic save. Grayson, however, was nowhere to be found. Emily found him in the hospital garden, staring at the ground. "Dr. Grayson," she began, her tone respectful but firm. "We all make mistakes. What matters is how we handle them." Grayson looked up, his usual arrogance replaced by a rare humility. "You were right, Carter. I let my pride get in the way. That patient could have died because of me." Emily nodded. "It's not about being perfect. It's about doing what's best for the patient." Grayson extended his hand. "Thank you. And I'm sorry." Emily shook his hand, a small smile on her face. As they walked back into the hospital together, the dynamic between them had shifted. Emily had earned Grayson's respect and proven that talent and humility could outshine even the biggest ego. This story teaches us that those who stand by truth and justice never lose. If you face injustice, don't lose heart. The path to justice may be difficult, but in the end, truth prevails. Before we dive into this story, let us know where you're riding in from and If you believe even standing for what's right, be sure to like and subscribe for more. The courtroom was in an uproar as 16-year-old Olivia Harper stood up to defend herself. Judge Reynolds shook his head sarcastically and said, "So, you're going to defend yourself? This isn't a school debate, child." Laughter echoed through the courtroom. The prosecution's lawyer, Dawson, smiled as if victory was already assured. Olivia's mother, Linda, sat in the back, watching anxiously. She couldn't afford a good lawyer, but she believed in her daughter. Case details. The charge was that Olivia had vandalized a store at 10:30 p.m. 2 witnesses claimed to have seen her at the scene. Olivia maintained her innocence. Flashback. That night, Olivia was returning from her friend's house. At 10:29 p.m., she bought snacks from a gas station, which was 20 minutes away from the crime scene. The next morning, the police arrested her simply because she resembled the suspect. Judge Reynolds seemed uninterested, as if this was a waste of time. Prosecution's first witness, Mr. Thompson, store owner. As the prosecution's first witness, Mr. Thompson, was called, he walked heavily to the stand and sat down. Prosecutor Daniel Dawson stepped forward with a smile. "Mr. Thompson, please tell the court what you saw that night." Mr. Thompson confidently said, "I saw a girl outside my store who looked suspicious. She was walking quickly and then suddenly broke my store's window." Dawson nodded and asked, "Are you sure it was the defendant, Olivia Harper?" Mr. Thompson loudly replied, "Absolutely. She was wearing a black hoodie and white shoes. I'm certain I saw her with my own eyes." The courtroom fell silent. Olivia took a deep breath and stood up. "I have some questions for Mr. Thompson, Your Honor." Judge Reynolds slowly shook his head, his eyes now fixed on Olivia with interest. Olivia approached Mr. Thompson and gently asked, "Mr. Thompson, you said I was wearing a black hoodie, correct?" "Yes, that's what I saw." Mr. Thompson immediately replied. Olivia presented a picture to the court, taken from the gas station security camera at 10:29 p.m. "Small blue diamond, this is me, and I wasn't wearing a hoodie that night, but a leather jacket. Do you still think it was me?" The courtroom buzzed. Some jurors began whispering. Mr. Thompson was startled. His face turned pale. He stammered, "Oh, maybe I made a mistake, but I definitely saw someone." Olivia smiled and asked another question. "Mr. Thompson, the light in front of your store is quite dim, isn't it?" Mr. Thompson hesitated. "Yes, but I remember what I saw." Olivia presented another piece of evidence to the court. Small blue diamond, it was a still image from a nearby store's CCTV footage showing the actual suspect. Small blue diamond, the girl in the image, was about 5 feet 8 inches tall, while Olivia was only 5 feet 4 inches. You can see here that the girl you saw was taller than me. Do you think I grew 4 inches overnight? The courtroom erupted in laughter. Judge Reynolds looked at Olivia intently for the first time. Mr. Thompson lowered his gaze. This was the first sign of inconsistency in the testimony. Prosecutor Dawson's smile began to fade. Prosecution's second witness, Officer Blake, security guard. The prosecution's next witness was Officer Blake, who had been stationed in front of the store. He stood confidently to give his testimony. "Officer Blake, please tell the court what you saw." Officer Blake took a deep breath and said, "I saw a girl running around 10:30 p.m. who looked suspicious. She was heading in the direction where the crime occurred." Olivia played her next card. "Are you sure it was 10:30? "Absolutely," Officer Blake said proudly. Olivia pulled out her strongest evidence, the gas station receipt from 10:29 p.m. Small blue diamond asterisk, this receipt shows I was at the gas station at 10:29, which is 20 minutes away from the crime scene. So if I was there at 10:29, could I have been running here at 10:30? The courtroom fell silent. Officer Blake broke into a sweat. He struggled to find words, but couldn't say anything. "Maybe," he said softly. Olivia shrugged. "Wrong time? But you just said you were sure." Judge Reynolds leaned forward in his chair. His expression was now serious. "This is getting very interesting," the judge said quietly. Prosecutor Dawson glared at his assistant. Cracks were appearing in their case. A new twist in the case. At that moment, the prosecution announced they would present a secret witness as their final move. "We have another witness who was present at the scene of the crime," Dawson said proudly. A young girl named Jessica was called to the stand. Olivia's face turned pale. "Who is this?" she thought to herself. Small blue diamond. Jessica trembled as she entered the witness box and said, "Yes, I saw Olivia there too." The courtroom buzzed again. Olivia's mother, Linda, had tears in her eyes. She sat down, heartbroken. Olivia clenched her fists. She knew this was a setup, but she wanted to know who had pressured Jessica. Olivia confronts Jessica. "Your Honor, may I ask Ms. Jessica a few questions?" Judge Reynolds nodded. Olivia was about to question Jessica like a seasoned lawyer. She stepped forward and gently asked, "Jessica, you said you saw me there, right?" Jessica hesitated. "Yes, I saw you there." Olivia lowered her head, as if deep in thought. Then she pulled out a document. "This is an official report stating that the security camera in front of the store wasn't recording that night because it was broken." The courtroom buzzed again. "Small blue diamond. So, which camera did you see me on, Jessica?" Jessica's face turned pale. I? She stammered. Olivia asked another question. "You said I was running. Did you see me up close?" Jessica nodded. "Yes. I saw you up close." Olivia's eyes sparkled. "Then tell me one thing, Jessica. If I was running, was my jacket zipper open or closed?" Jessica fell silent. Small blue diamond. Everyone in the courtroom stared at Jessica in surprise. This was a small but clever question. If Jessica had really seen Olivia, she would have answered immediately. But she was still thinking. Olivia increased the pressure. "If you saw me up close, this question should be easy to answer. Was the zipper open or closed?" Tears welled up in Jessica's eyes. I don't know," she said softly. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. The truth revealed. Judge Reynolds raised his eyebrows and said, "Ms. Jessica, if you didn't see it yourself, why are you giving this testimony?" Jessica's breathing quickened. She kept cracking her knuckles. Then suddenly, she burst into tears. "I'm sorry. I didn't see Olivia there." Small blue diamond. The courtroom exploded with gasps. Small blue diamond. Prosecutor Dawson's face turned pale. Small blue diamond. Olivia took a deep breath. She had suspected something was wrong. "Then why did you lie?" Judge Reynolds asked sternly. Jessica's voice trembled. "I was threatened. Someone told me if I didn't testify against Olivia, I would be harmed." Olivia's eyes widened in shock. "What? Who threatened you?" the judge asked sharply. Jessica pointed at Prosecutor Dawson. Small blue diamond. The courtroom fell into stunned silence. Small blue diamond. Judge Reynolds' eyes were now fixed on Dawson. Small blue diamond. Dawson broke into a sweat. "This is a lie," he shouted. But Olivia immediately presented another piece of evidence. "Here's a copy of the message sent to Jessica's phone, threatening her." The message came from the number of Dawson's assistant. The courtroom erupted. Judge Reynolds slammed his gavel. "This is unacceptable. Threatening witnesses in court is a serious crime." Small blue diamond. Dawson's face turned red. Small blue diamond. The judge immediately ordered court police to investigate Dawson. Small blue diamond. Olivia's innocence had been proven. The judge paused for a moment, then said, "The jury will now deliberate and deliver its verdict." The courtroom fell silent. Olivia's mother had tears in her eyes, but they were tears of joy now. The verdict. The jury returned after a short deliberation. Their faces were serious, as if they had reached an important decision. The court clerk stood up and announced, The jury has reached a verdict. Will the foreperson please read the verdict? The jury foreperson, a middle-aged man, stood up. He pulled out a piece of paper, cleared his throat, and said, "After considering all the evidence, witness testimonies, and the defense's strong arguments, the jury finds the defendant, Olivia Harper." The courtroom fell completely silent, everyone eagerly awaiting the next words. "Not guilty on all charges." The courtroom erupted in cheers. Small Blue Diamond Olivia had won. Small Blue Diamond Linda, Olivia's mother, burst into tears of joy. Small Blue Diamond Prosecutor Dawson's face turned pale. Mother and daughter reunite. Olivia's mother, Linda, rushed forward and hugged her daughter tightly. "I knew you were innocent, my daughter." Linda's voice trembled. Olivia couldn't hold back her tears either. She hugged her mother and whispered, "Mom, we won. I've been proven innocent." The courtroom broke into applause. Small Blue Diamond, some people praised Olivia's courage. Small Blue Diamond, others were amazed that a young girl had defended herself and won. Small Blue Diamond, several reporters waited outside the courtroom to get Olivia's statement. Dawson's downfall, the lie exposed. Judge Reynolds raised his hand, and the courtroom fell silent. He leaned forward and said, "This court officially declares that lawyer Daniel Dawson used illegal means to pressure witnesses and obstruct justice. He will be investigated, and if found guilty, his license will be revoked." Small Blue Diamond, the courtroom buzzed again. Small Blue Diamond Dawson's face turned pale, he was speechless. Court police stepped forward to take Dawson away. Olivia took a deep breath. This was the biggest victory for justice. Outside the courtroom, Olivia becomes a hero. As Olivia stepped out of the courtroom, reporters surrounded her. "Olivia, you defended yourself in court. Were you ever scared?" a reporter asked, holding out a microphone. Olivia smiled slightly and said, "Yes, I was scared. But I knew if I stood by the truth, justice would prevail." Small Blue Diamond, her words went viral on social media. Small Blue Diamond people everywhere praised the young girl's bravery. Olivia looked back at her mother, who was smiling with pride. "Let's go home, Mom." Linda took her daughter's hand, and they walked away together, toward a bright new future. The end. The scene opens in a quiet suburban neighborhood. A car pulls up near a deserted park. A German Shepherd, Max, sits in the back seat, wagging his tail, unaware of what is about to happen. Max's owner, James, steps out, looking anxious. He opens the back door, and Max jumps out excitedly, thinking this is a fun outing. But James hesitates, his hands trembling. He whispers, "I'm sorry, buddy," before getting back into the car and driving away. Max runs after the car, barking and wagging his tail, but the vehicle speeds away. Confused, Max stands still, his ears drooping. Night falls, and he curls up under a park bench, shivering. Loneliness begins to creep in, but Max stays hopeful, believing James will return. Max waits through the night, but as dawn breaks, hunger and confusion settle in. Will his owner return, or is he truly alone? Days pass. Max roams the streets, sniffing around for James, but he is met with closed doors and indifferent faces. Hunger gnaws at his stomach. One day, he approaches a small bakery where a kind woman, Lisa, notices him. She sets out a bowl of water and some bread. Max hesitates, but eventually eats. Lisa tries to approach him, but he flinches and runs. He still believes James will come back. The next day, he finds shelter near an abandoned building. Rain pours heavily, and Max huddles in a corner, his body trembling from cold and exhaustion. Meanwhile, Lisa contacts a local rescue shelter and informs them about Maximum. The shelter workers, led by Tom, start searching for him. But Max remains elusive, afraid of trusting anyone else. Just when Max begins to lose hope, a new set of eyes starts watching him from the shadows. But are they friend or foe? Max is startled by a rustling sound. A shadowy figure lurks nearby, a man in ragged clothes, eyes filled with a dangerous glint. This is Frank, a known dogfighter. He notices Max's strong build and fierce eyes. "You'll make a fine fighter," he mutters, stepping forward with a rope in hand. Max growls, but is too weak to resist when Frank captures him. He is thrown into a dingy basement where caged, wounded dogs whimper in pain. Fear grips Max as he realizes he is trapped in a nightmare far worse than abandonment. Meanwhile, Lisa and Tom intensify their search. They find security footage of Max being taken and trace it back to Frank. With time running out, they prepare a plan to save Max before he is forced into a brutal fight. The clock is ticking. Will Max be rescued in time, or is he doomed to a fate worse than loneliness? The night is tense as Tom and Lisa, along with the police, storm Frank's hideout. Chaos erupts. Frank tries to flee, but he is quickly apprehended. Tom rushes into the basement, finding Max caged and whimpering. "We got you, buddy," Tom whispers as he gently opens the cage. Max, though scared, senses kindness and takes a shaky step forward. For the first time in weeks, he feels warmth and safety. Max is taken to a shelter where he slowly heals, physically and emotionally. Lisa visits him daily, building his trust. After weeks of care, Max finally wags his tail again. One day, Lisa kneels beside him, whispering, "How about a forever home?" With hopeful eyes, Max licks her hand. Lisa adopts Max, giving him the love and security he had longed for. He is no longer abandoned, no longer afraid. He is finally home. A heartbreaking journey ends in love. But how many others like Max are still waiting for their second chance? The courtroom fell into a stunned silence as a mysterious woman stood up and declared, "He knows everything." Judge Carter's hands trembled as Eleanor smiled and said, "The truth can't be hidden anymore." Before we dive into this story, let us know where you're tuning in from, and if you believe in standing up for what's right, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. The courtroom was a stage, and every player knew their role. The air buzzed with anticipation, thick enough to cut with a knife. Spectators leaned forward, their whispers weaving a tapestry of curiosity and judgment. At the center of it all sat Judge William Carter, a man whose reputation for stern justice was as unshakable as the mahogany bench he presided over. But today, the script was about to be rewritten. The prosecutor, a sharp-witted woman with years of experience, stepped forward to deliver her closing argument. Her voice was steady, her words precise. She was about to strike the final blow in a case that had gripped the nation, a high-stakes embezzlement scandal involving powerful businessmen and millions of dollars. But just as she began to speak, a voice rang out, sharp and clear, cutting through the tension like a knife. "He knows everything." The room froze. Every head turned, every breath held. The voice belonged to a woman standing at the back of the courtroom, her presence as commanding as her words. She was in her late 30s, dressed modestly yet elegantly, her piercing blue eyes locked onto Judge Carter. "Bailiff! Remove that woman at once." Judge Carter's voice boomed, but beneath the authority was a tremor of something uncharacteristic, fear. The bailiff hesitated, glancing between the judge and the woman. She didn't flinch. Instead, she took a deliberate step forward, her gaze never wavering. "You know who I am, Judge Carter," she said, her voice calm but laced with an eerie certainty. "And you know why I'm here." The murmurs grew louder, the weight of her words sending an electric charge through the room. Reporters scrambled to capture the moment, their cameras flashing like lightning in a storm. Judge Carter's grip on the gavel trembled, his face pale as the walls of the courtroom seemed to close in around him. "Court is adjourned," he declared, slamming the gavel down with a force that echoed through the room. He stood abruptly, his robes billowing as he turned away from the bench. But the woman didn't leave. Instead, she smiled, a knowing smile that sent a chill down the spines of all who witnessed it. This was far from over. Judge William Carter sat alone in his dimly lit office, the heavy oak door locked behind him. The echo of those 3 words, "He knows everything," still reverberated in his mind. The woman's voice had carried something chilling, something familiar. But it couldn't be, could it? His hands trembled slightly as he reached for a crystal decanter, pouring himself a generous measure of whiskey. The liquid burned as it slid down his throat, but it did little to calm his nerves. 15 years ago, a case had haunted him, a case buried deep but never forgotten. A young woman, Anna Whitmore, had dared to stand against one of the most powerful senators in the country. She had presented damning, irrefutable evidence. And yet, the case had disappeared. The witness had vanished. And those who tried to dig deeper had met grim fates. Judge Carter had been a different man then, a rising star in the judicial system, ambitious, hungry for influence. He hadn't asked questions. He had followed orders. But now, the past was clawing its way back. A sharp knock on his door made him jolt. He hesitated before unlocking it. His assistant, Claire, stood there, her usually composed face now pale and uneasy. "Sir, she's still here. She refuses to leave." Claire's voice wavered. "She says she has proof." Carter's heart pounded in his ears. He wasn't ready for this. He wasn't sure he'd ever be. Still, he rose from his chair, straightened his tie, and walked toward the door, his breath shallow. As he stepped into the lobby, the woman was already waiting, standing near the large marble pillar. The second their eyes met, his stomach lurched. She smiled, not in a friendly way, but in a way that said she knew everything. That she had waited for this moment. "Judge Carter," she said smoothly, stepping forward. "It's been a long time." He found his voice, though it felt hoarse. "Who are you?" She leaned in ever so slightly. "You already know. And you know why I'm here." Carter inhaled sharply, his grip tightening into a fist. His past had finally come knocking, and it wasn't going away quietly. Judge Carter barely slept that night. The weight of Eleanor Shaw's words pressed down on him like an iron chain, dragging him into a past he had fought so hard to bury. He spent hours going through old case files, scanning pages that once meant nothing but now carried a sinister significance. By morning, he was exhausted, but he had made a decision: he had to hear her out. The courtroom was eerily empty when he arrived. It wasn't an official session, it was a closed-door meeting, a desperate attempt to keep the floodgates from bursting open. Eleanor Shaw sat on the witness stand, an air of quiet confidence surrounding her. "Let's get one thing straight," Carter said, his voice hoarse. "If you have proof, show it. Otherwise, this ends now." Eleanor reached into her bag and pulled out a thick manila folder, dropping it onto the desk between them. Carter hesitated before opening it. The first page alone made his breath hitch, a signed statement from a former court clerk detailing manipulated evidence, forced confessions, and bribed jurors. "These are sealed documents," he muttered. "How did you get these? Does it matter?" Eleanor countered. "What matters is that you were involved, Judge Carter. Maybe not directly, maybe not intentionally, but you played your part. And now you have to decide what to do about it." His fingers tightened around the edges of the folder. "If I open this case, you know what happens next." Eleanor leaned forward, her eyes locking onto his. "Yes. And so do they. Which is why you don't have much time." A loud knock on the chamber door made them both jolt. Carter's pulse quickened. It wasn't supposed to be common knowledge that they were meeting. "Sir, you have a visitor," his assistant's voice came through the door, tinged with something Carter couldn't quite place: fear. "It's urgent." Carter exchanged a glance with Eleanor. They both knew someone else had found out. As he stood to open the door, a sinking feeling settled in his gut. The hidden truth was no longer hidden. And someone was willing to do anything to keep it that way. The courtroom was silent, the air thick with tension. The walls, which had witnessed years of carefully orchestrated trials, now stood as silent spectators to a moment that could shake the foundation of the judicial system. Judge William Carter sat at his bench, his hands gripping the gavel tightly. The evidence Eleanor Shaw had presented over the past days had left no room for doubt. The corruption ran deep, far deeper than anyone had imagined. Eleanor sat at the witness stand, her posture unyielding. Her eyes, sharp and determined, met Carter's gaze. "You know what must be done," she said, her voice unwavering. "The truth must come out." A murmur spread through the gallery, a mixture of anticipation and disbelief. Journalists scribbled furiously, cameras clicked, and the entire city held its breath. The defense attorney, sweating under the weight of irrefutable proof, rose to his feet. "Your Honor, my client." Carter raised his hand, silencing him. He turned his gaze toward the accused, a man who once walked these halls with unchecked power, now reduced to a mere defendant. Taking a deep breath, Carter finally spoke. "This court finds sufficient grounds to launch an independent investigation into judicial misconduct. Effective immediately, all cases linked to the presented evidence will be reopened." Gasps filled the room. Some in shock, others in triumph. The powerful men who once controlled the system exchanged glances, realizing that their empire of deceit was crumbling before their eyes. Eleanor exhaled, her mission accomplished. But she knew this was only the beginning. The war against corruption wasn't over, it had only just begun. As she stepped outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed her, eager for a statement. She simply smiled and said, "He knows everything. And now, so does the world." The truth had been set free, and with it, the promise of justice. But in the shadows, the battle was far from finished. Officer Ryan was patrolling a busy street when a frightened little girl, Emily, tugged at his sleeve and whispered for chilling words, "She is not Mom." Before he could react, a woman forcefully dragged Emily away. Sensing danger, Ryan immediately called for backup, setting off a race against time to uncover the truth. Before we dive into this story, let us know where you're watching from, and if you believe in the power of courage and justice, hit that like button and subscribe for more compelling. The camera captures a bustling street with people walking in different directions. Cars pass by swiftly, and shops and stalls line the sidewalks. Police Officer Ryan, dressed in his uniform, patrols the street. The cold air carries a sense of weariness on people's faces. Ryan, VO, thinking these streets hold countless stories, some ordinary, some that send chills down your spine. But today, something feels different. Maybe someone's silence is about to turn into a scream. Suddenly, a little girl, Emily, with fear-stricken eyes and trembling hands, tugs at Ryan's sleeve. Ryan bends down to look at her. Fear and helplessness are evident in her eyes. Emily, whispering with trembling voice, "She is not my mom. Please, help me." Ryan's face shows shock and concern. Before he can ask anything, a woman approaches hastily, looking both angry and anxious. She forcefully grabs Emily's hand and starts dragging her away. Woman, forcing a smile, but eyes filled with unease. "Sorry, officer. She's very naughty, always bothering strangers. Come on, sweetie, let's go home." Ryan senses something is off. Without wasting time, he immediately calls for backup on his radio and quickly follows the woman. The street turns chaotic. Ryan runs after the woman, who is forcibly pulling Emily along. Emily's sobs grow louder, and her eyes scream for help. Bystanders look on in shock, but no one dares to intervene. Ryan swiftly takes a shortcut and blocks the woman's path. His breathing is heavy, but his eyes are sharp and focused. Ryan, firmly, eyes locked on her, "Stop. I need to ask you both some questions." The woman freezes for a moment but quickly composes herself. She tries to smile, but sweat glistens on her forehead. She grips Emily's wrist even tighter, making the little girl whimper in pain. Woman, with false confidence, "I told you, she's my daughter. She just says random things. Let us go." Ryan's gaze stays fixed on the woman, but then he looks at Emily, who is visibly shaking. Her eyes silently plead for help. Ryan crouches down slightly, his voice turning softer. "Ryan, gently, calmly, Emily, do you know this woman?" Emily's breath hitches. She lowers her gaze, then hesitantly points to Ryan's pocket, as if trying to give him something. Ryan observes closely and notices faint nail marks on her wrist, as if she had been grabbed forcefully. Fury flashes in Ryan's eyes. He immediately speaks into his radio. "Ryan, sternly over the radio, I need a team here now. Possible child abduction." The woman's face drains of color. She suddenly turns and tries to flee, but Ryan swiftly grabs her arm. Emily is jerked free and quickly hides behind Ryan, trembling. Ryan secures the woman, handcuffing her and leading her toward the patrol car. His expression is stern, but his heart finds relief knowing he acted just in time. Interrogation at the station. At the police station, the woman is seated in the interrogation room. The dim lighting casts shadows across the walls. Meanwhile, Emily is placed in a safe space with a kind female officer who offers her warm milk and a blanket. Despite this, fear still lingers in Emily's eyes. Ryan enters the interrogation room. He sits across from the woman, studying her carefully. Without hesitation, he fires his first question. "Ryan, firmly, if she's your daughter, show me her birth certificate." Woman, visibly nervous, sweating eye. "I don't have it right now. It's at home." Ryan opens a file and places a document in front of her. "Ryan, your name is not listed as her parent. You're lying." The woman's face turns pale. The interrogation continues, and soon, Emily's missing persons report is retrieved, exposing the woman's deception. Emily's parents arrive. Ryan contacts Emily's real parents, who rush to the station in panic. As soon as Emily sees her mother, she bursts into tears and runs into her arms. Ryan explains the situation to the parents, while the kidnapper finally confesses. She was part of a larger trafficking network that abducted children. Ryan and his team raid the trafficking gang's hideout, arresting multiple members and rescuing several kidnapped children. Ryan, reflecting one little girl's courage saved many innocent lives. Emily steps forward and hugs Ryan tightly. The camera slowly pans upward, while hopeful music plays in the background. The end. It is a regular school morning. Children are boarding the yellow school bus one by one. Some are laughing and joking, others are chatting with their friends, while a few stare out the windows, lost in thought. At the front of the bus sits Mr. Roberts, a kind and caring 55-year-old bus driver who has been transporting children to school for many years. Most of the kids adore him for his warm personality and gentle nature. Among them is Emily, a quiet 7-year-old girl. She slowly steps onto the bus, clutching her school bag tightly. Her face is expressionless, but her anxious eyes reveal that something is wrong. Without saying a word, she walks to her usual seat and sits down, staring blankly out the window. As the bus continues its journey, the other children remain engaged in their activities. However, Mr. Roberts notices that Emily seems more withdrawn than usual. Still, he doesn't dwell on it too much until something shocking happens. Suddenly, Emily jumps up from her seat, tears streaming down her face. She runs to the front, her tiny hands shaking, and grabs Mr. Roberts' arm. "Mr. Roberts," she cries out. Startled, Mr. Roberts quickly presses the brakes. The bus comes to a halt as all the children turn to look at Emily in confusion. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Mr. Roberts asks gently. Emily is sobbing so hard that she can barely speak. Then, after a few deep breaths, she utters 4 words that send a chill down everyone's spine. "Mommy didn't wake up." Mr. Roberts' face turns pale. The gravity of Emily's words hits him like a ton of bricks. The bus falls into complete silence. Every child stares, their playful chatter replaced with concern. Mr. Roberts kneels beside Emily, his voice calm but urgent. "What do you mean, honey?" Emily wipes her tears and, between sniffles, explains, "I tried to wake Mommy this morning, but she wouldn't move. I shook her, I called her name, but she wouldn't wake up." A deep worry takes over Mr. Roberts' mind. He knows something is terribly wrong. Without wasting a second, he reaches for his radio and contacts the school transport control center. "This is bus 47. We have an emergency. I need immediate assistance at Emily Carter's residence, possible medical emergency. At the same time, he gently holds Emily's shoulders and reassures her, don't worry, sweetheart. We're going to help your mommy. Emily's tear-filled eyes show pure desperation. She doesn't fully understand what's happening, only that something is very, very wrong. Mr. Roberts makes a quick decision. He pulls over at the next safe stop and instructs a nearby teacher to watch over the children. Then, he takes Emily's hand and says, show me your house, sweetheart. Emily, without hesitation, starts running, leading Mr. Roberts through the streets toward her home. While running, he radios again, send an ambulance immediately. The child says her mother is unresponsive. A few minutes later, they reach Emily's house. The front door is slightly open. Emily rushes inside, calling out, Mommy, but receives no answer. Mr. Roberts follows her in and sees Emily's mother lying on the bed, motionless. He cautiously approaches, gently shaking her shoulder. No response. A wave of fear washes over him. Just then, the sound of sirens echoes outside. The paramedics rush in and immediately assess Emily's mother. One of them turns to Mr. Roberts and says, she's alive, but unconscious. We need to get her to the hospital immediately. Emily clings tightly to Mr. Roberts' hand as she watches the paramedics place her mother in the ambulance. Tears well up in her eyes again, but this time, they are a mix of fear and hope. Moments later, Mr. Roberts receives a call from the hospital. A doctor informs him Emily's mother overdosed on medication. If she hadn't been found in time, the situation could have been fatal. But thanks to Emily's quick action, she is out of danger now. Relief washes over him. He kneels beside Emily and softly tells her, you were so brave, sweetheart. You saved your mommy's life today. A few days later, Emily's mother recovers fully. Mr. Roberts, curious to check on them, stops by their home after work. As soon as Emily sees him, she runs toward him and throws her arms around him in a tight hug. Mr. Roberts, she exclaims joyfully. Tears glisten in her eyes as she says, you saved my mommy. Mr. Roberts smiles warmly and gently pats her head. No, sweetheart. You did. You were the real hero today. Danny thought he stole just another bike until he realized the owner was Keanu Reeves, and Keanu doesn't just let things go. Before we let us know where you're tuning in from, and if you believe in standing up for what's right, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. The night air was crisp, the city lights casting flickering shadows across the deserted alley. Danny had been doing this for years, stealing motorcycles was his trade, and he was damn good at it. He prided himself on never getting caught. His latest target, however, was unlike anything he had ever seen before. A sleek black ARCH KRGT one stood there like a mechanical beast, its polished chrome parts gleaming under the dim street lamp. The machine was a work of art, a rare and custom-made beauty that only a handful of people in the world owned. Danny licked his lips. If he could get this baby off the streets, it would sell for a fortune on the black market. He glanced around. The coast was clear. He moved swiftly, his hands deftly working the ignition wires. It was only a matter of seconds before the bike roared to life beneath him. The adrenaline rush hit him like a wave. He twisted the throttle and shot out of the alley, completely unaware of the storm he had just set into motion. Elsewhere, in an exclusive restaurant across town, Keanu Reeves sat at a private booth, engaged in a lively conversation about his latest movie project. His easygoing demeanor masked the intensity that had made him a legend both on screen and off. But as he reached for his phone, his expression shifted. A notification from his custom GPS tracker blinked on the screen, bike moved. His heart clenched. It wasn't possible, he had parked it in a safe spot. Keanu's jaw tightened. Years of riding had made him deeply connected to his bikes, and this one was special. He wasted no time. Excusing himself from the table, he stood up, his mind already calculating the next move. His bike was stolen. and he was going to get it back. Meanwhile, Danny rode like the wind. He knew better than to go straight to his usual chop shop. Something about this bike felt different. He needed to lay low, at least for a while. So he decided to hide out in his old warehouse, a run-down place on the outskirts of town. He parked the bike inside and locked the doors. Tomorrow, he would figure out his next move. But as he settled into the worn-out couch in the corner, a strange feeling crept up his spine. He had stolen hundreds of bikes before, yet something about this one made him uneasy. It was as if the machine itself was alive, waiting for its true owner to return. Little did he know that return was coming sooner than he expected. Keanu Reeves doesn't just let things go. With a lifetime of action movies and real-life martial arts training, he knows how to track his target. Danny thinks he's safe, but the hunt has just begun. Keanu's boots hit the pavement with purpose as he strode toward his car, his mind working like a well-oiled machine. He had always been a calm and collected person, but when someone took what was his, especially his beloved ARCH bike, he made sure they regretted it. He pulled out his phone, opening an app designed specifically for this scenario. The small GPS tracker hidden beneath the bike's frame showed a blinking red dot moving toward the outskirts of the city. Keanu smirked. The thief thought he had gotten away. Not tonight. Danny's warehouse hideout. Danny paced back and forth in the dimly lit warehouse, the sound of dripping water from a leaky pipe echoing in the silence. He had seen expensive bikes before, but this one felt different. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had made a mistake. His phone buzzed. It was his contact in the underground market. "You got something?" the gruff voice on the other end asked. "Yeah. High-end custom job. Worth a fortune." There was a pause. Then, the voice came back, more urgent this time. "You idiot. Tell me you didn't steal an ARCH KRGT1. Danny frowned. "So what if I did?" Another pause, then a heavy sigh. "Because if you did, you just stole from Keanu Reeves." Danny's blood ran cold. He had heard stories, how Reeves was more than just a Hollywood actor. He was a martial artist, a biker, and someone you didn't want to mess with. The man was known for doing his own stunts, training with ex-military experts, and being relentless when he set his mind to something. Danny swallowed hard. "You're joking, right?" A dry chuckle came from the other end. "You'll find out soon enough." The call ended. Danny's hands trembled slightly as he looked at the bike. He had to get rid of it. Fast. Danny thinks he's just dealing with another angry bike owner. He has no idea he's about to go face-to-face with a man who has spent years training for moments like this. Keanu is not here to negotiate, he's here to reclaim what's his. The warehouse door creaked open slightly, a gust of cold air rushing in. Danny spun around, his pulse quickening. The dim lighting made it hard to see, but he could feel something, someone, watching him. A shadow moved. Then a voice, calm but firm. "You took something of mine." Danny's stomach dropped. He recognized that voice immediately. Keanu Reeves stepped into the light, his sharp eyes locked onto Danny's. There was no rage, no unnecessary aggression, just pure, controlled intensity. Danny had faced angry owners before. But this was something else. Hook. Danny underestimated his opponent. Now, he faces the consequences of his mistake. But will he make it out in one piece? Danny took a step back, his breath shaky. "Look, man, it was a mistake. I didn't know it was yours." Keanu tilted his head slightly. "And that makes it okay?" Before Danny could respond, Keanu moved, fast. A precise strike sent Danny sprawling onto the concrete floor. He groaned, scrambling to his feet. "I don't want trouble," Danny muttered. Keanu's expression remained unreadable. "You already have it." Danny lunged forward in desperation, but Keanu sidestepped effortlessly, grabbing Danny's arm and twisting it behind his back. He leaned in close. Stay away from bikes that aren't yours. With a final shove, Kiana released him. Danny hit the floor, gasping. He knew he was beaten. Kiana walked to his bike, swung a leg over, and started the engine. As the deep roar echoed in the warehouse, he gave Danny one last glance. Then, with a twist of the throttle, he was gone, leaving Danny with nothing but regret and the sound of his own rapid breathing. The end. Officer James was patrolling the city Central Park as usual. The sun was about to set, casting an eerie glow over the area. The gentle breeze rustled the tree branches, and the chirping of birds filled the air. James liked patrolling this park, but today, something felt different. Suddenly, someone tugged at his uniform sleeve. When he looked down, he saw a little boy, about 7 years old, standing there, terrified. His brown face was marked with fear, as if he had seen something no one else had. "Officer? I need to tell you something," the boy whispered. James knelt down and gently asked, "What is it, son?" The boy's trembling voice uttered 5 chilling words, "That man is watching me." The unseen stalker. A chill ran down James' spine. He immediately stood up and scanned the surroundings, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The boy's eyes were fixed on a specific spot. James followed his gaze, but all he saw was a bench with an old man sitting on it. "Which man?" James whispered back. Ethan pointed with a shaky finger, but when James turned to look again, there was no one there. His heartbeat quickened. He grabbed his radio and alerted the nearby officers to stay on high alert. "What's your name?" James asked. "Ethan." The boy murmured. "The hidden truth." Ethan's voice quivered as he said, "He was following me yesterday, and the day before. He wants to take me away." James reassured Ethan and asked about his parents. Ethan whispered, "My mom is at work, and my dad is not around anymore." To investigate further, James headed to the park's security camera control room. When they reviewed the footage, the truth was revealed: a shadowy figure had been stalking Ethan for the past 3 days. Chasing the mysterious figure, James ordered his team to move in. Moments later, at the far end, man appeared. He was middle-aged, wearing tattered clothes, and staring at Ethan with unsettling intensity. James stepped forward, but as soon as he called out to the man, he bolted. "Stop!" James yelled and sprinted after him. Chasing the mysterious figure, James ordered his team to move in. Moments later, at the far end of the park, a suspicious man appeared. He was middle-aged, wearing tattered clothes, and staring at Ethan with unsettling intensity. James stepped forward, but as soon as he called out to the man, he bolted. "Stop!" James yelled and sprinted after him. Finally, James caught the man in a deserted alley. When he tried to identify him, he discovered he was a wanted criminal involved in multiple child abductions. "How do you know Ethan?" James demanded. The man smirked and said chillingly, "Because I'm his father, and I've come to take him back." James felt as if the ground beneath him had disappeared. Ethan's mother had always said his father was dead. But the truth was something else entirely. A mother's secret. James immediately called Ethan's mother. When she arrived, her face turned pale. "How is he alive?" He was supposed to be dead." Fear gleamed in her eyes. The truth was finally exposed. Ethan's father was a notorious criminal who had abandoned his family years ago. He was dangerous, and Ethan's mother had faked his death to protect her son. But now, he had returned. In the courtroom, Officer Bradley arrogantly mocks a teenage boy, Jake. But the moment Jake presents a video in front of everyone, Bradley's face turns pale. The entire atmosphere of the courtroom shifts in an instant. The courtroom tension begins. The grand courtroom was an imposing sight, with towering pillars and an air of authority that weighed heavily on everyone inside. Spectators whispered among themselves, a mixture of curiosity and expectation filling the air. Officer Bradley strode in confidently, his uniform crisp, his posture exuding dominance. His eye scanned the room, landing on Jake, the teenage boy seated anxiously at the witness stand. A smirk crept across Bradley's face as he adjusted his badge, as if already certain of his victory. Jake, on the other hand, was the picture of quiet resilience. Dressed in a simple button-down shirt, he shifted slightly but maintained his composure. His fingers tapped lightly against the wooden stand, a subtle sign of nerves kept in check. The judge's gavel pounded, commanding silence, and the murmurs instantly faded. The trial commenced. Jake was accused of resisting arrest and assaulting an officer, serious allegations that could change the course of his life forever. Bradley, known for his aggressive tactics and long-standing reputation as a no-nonsense enforcer, leaned back in his seat, his confidence unshaken. The prosecutor, a sharp-suited man with a piercing gaze, began laying out the charges. The defendant, Jake Carter, not only resisted a lawful arrest but also physically attacked an officer of the law. Such behavior cannot be tolerated in our society. Jake's attorney, Ms. Reynolds, an experienced and composed woman, stood ready. Your Honor, my client maintains his innocence and has evidence that will shine a light on the true events of that night. A flicker of doubt crossed Bradley's face, but he quickly masked it. After all, he was the law here, or so he believed. The mockery begins. As the prosecutor began questioning Jake, Bradley couldn't help but scoff. So, you're telling us that a 17-year-old kid thinks he knows better than the law, he jeered, his voice laced with condescension. Laughter rippled through some corners of the courtroom. Jake clenched his fists, but remained composed. I know the truth, Jake replied calmly. Bradley laughed, shaking his head, convinced that the court would believe his word over that of a teenager. Ms. Reynolds interjected, her voice firm. Objection, Your Honor. Officer Bradley is taunting my client instead of answering questions. The judge nodded. Sustained. Officer Bradley, I suggest you maintain professionalism in this courtroom. Bradley scoffed but said nothing. He still believed his power and reputation would be enough to sway the court in his favor. The courtroom tension begins. The grand courtroom was an imposing sight, with towering pillars and an air of authority that weighed heavily on everyone inside. Spectators whispered among themselves, a mixture of curiosity and expectation filling the air. Officer Bradley strode in confidently, his uniform crisp, his posture exuding dominance. His eye scanned the room, landing on Jake, the teenage boy seated anxiously at the witness stand. A smirk crept across Bradley's face as he adjusted his badge, as if already certain of his victory. Jake, on the other hand, was the picture of quiet resilience. Dressed in a simple button-down shirt, he shifted slightly but maintained his composure. His fingers tapped lightly against the wooden stand, a subtle sign of nerves kept in check. The judge's gavel pounded, commanding silence, and the murmurs instantly faded. The trial commenced. Jake was accused of resisting arrest and assaulting an officer, serious allegations that could change the course of his life forever. Bradley, known for his aggressive tactics and long-standing reputation as a no-nonsense enforcer, leaned back in his seat, his confidence unshaken. The prosecutor, a sharp-suited man with a piercing gaze, began laying out the charges. The defendant, Jake Carter, not only resisted a lawful arrest but also physically attacked an officer of the law. Such behavior cannot be tolerated in our society. Jake's attorney, Ms. Reynolds, an experienced and composed woman, stood ready. Your Honor, my client maintains his innocence and has evidence that will shine a light on the true events of that night. A flicker of doubt crossed Bradley's face, but he quickly masked it. After all, he was the law here, or so he believed. The mockery begins. As the prosecutor began questioning Jake, Bradley couldn't help but scoff. So, you're telling us that a 17-year-old kid thinks he knows better than the law, he jeered, his voice laced with condescension. Laughter rippled through some corners of the courtroom. Jake clenched his fists but remained composed. I know the truth, Jake replied calmly. Bradley laughed, shaking his head, convinced that the court would believe his word over that of a teenager. Ms. Reynolds interjected, her voice firm. Objection, Your Honor. Officer Bradley is taunting my client instead of answering questions. The judge nodded. Sustained. Officer Bradley, I suggest you maintain professionalism in this courtroom. Bradley scoffed but said nothing. He still believed his power and reputation would be enough to sway the court in his favor. The defense fights back. Jake's defense attorney, Ms. Reynolds, stepped forward. Officer Bradley, would you say that you always act within the law? She asked. Bradley sat up straight. Of course. I've dedicated my life to upholding justice. Ms. Reynolds nodded. And would you say that your actions on the night of Jake's arrest were lawful? Bradley smirked. Absolutely. The kid resisted, and I did what was necessary. Ms. Reynolds paced in front of the jury. Then you wouldn't mind if we took a closer look at the events of that night? Bradley's smirk wavered for the briefest moment. The turning point. Jake shifted in his seat and exchanged a glance with his lawyer. Your Honor, I have evidence that proves my innocence, he declared. A hush fell over the courtroom. The judge raised an eyebrow. Proceed, he instructed. Jake reached into his pocket and pulled out a USB drive. This video will show what really happened that night. Bradley's smirk faltered slightly, but he quickly regained his composure. There's no video, he scoffed. The body cam footage was damaged during the altercation. Jake's lawyer smirked.